here today. We welcome you. We thank you for taking the time to sit with us and have this conversation, answer these questions that come in from the community. We are very passionate about what we do in the disability advocacy community. And so it's really a pleasure to be able to converse with you all about these subjects. As we go forward to this evening, we're gonna get started with a brief introduction from our organizations, our partner organizations this evening, a bit of a brief intro about their work and who they are. And so if we could go ahead, and do we have representation from Sonara?
Sure. Hi, everyone. That's me. I'm Lindsay Jones-Renaud. I'm the owner of Sonara. Really excited to be partnering on this. Sonara is a feminist facilitation, feminist policy analysis, and feminist strategy organization working locally and globally. I also have two daughters who go to school in Ward 7 here in DC.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. And DC for Democracy, welcome. Do we have DC for Democracy yet? Maybe not. Washington Teachers Union, good evening.
Good evening. I'm Laura Fuchs. I'm the Secretary of the Washington Teachers Union. I also chair our Committee on Political Education, and we're very happy to partner with.
Hello.
Are you working with Carlos?
Yeah, I'm Stephanie.
Oh, Stephanie.
Yeah. I think it was up here. Which one? Okay. This one.
So sorry, please everybody mute yourself. I will do my best to mute everybody as I catch them.
The pesky mute button really gets you on these calls sometimes. I'm sorry, Washington Teachers Union, you were introducing?
Yeah, no, I just, we're very happy to be partnered with everyone on this forum for the public. We had one for our members in labor, but this is even better, being so that everyone can hear from candidates and make a decision for themselves. So glad to be a part.
Thank you. And DC for Democracy. I think I see folks in the chat from DC for Democracy.
Yes, hello everybody. Great to see you all. Happy to be here. Great to see you, Chioma, and all the other wonderful folks on this panel. Looking forward to this.
And last but not least, She Born Free.
Well, yeah, I'm just really grateful, and I'm Chioma Ru, founder of She Born Free, and just really honored and grateful to have so many people interested in this forum. We thought within our organization, mostly working in advocacy and parent coaching, as well as consulting with different organizations, public and private, on matters pertaining to students with disabilities. One of our key projects is working with Bright Beam organization in Minneapolis, which has allowed me to onboard 5 parent leaders, of which Michelle Parrish is one of our parent fellows with the Parent Advocacy Action Team. And so together we do we meet a lot, we try to get deeper on the issues, we do storytelling, and we form partnerships with different entities, particularly around mental health and special education in general. Our mission is to make sure that we are looking at the achievement gap for Black and Brown students with disabilities, but we aim to support all families of all races with their children that may be behind the curve for different reasons, mostly because of disabilities, but also because of other at-risk categories that may or may not be highlighted as a reason why a kid is not getting the best opportunities. So it's my honor to host this forum because we are disability focused. I'm like really nervous right now, waiting for our ASL and our Spanish interpreters to get on. And if it doesn't happen, because this is all happening in real time, my deepest apologies, and we'll make it up to the community, to our deaf community and our Spanish speaking community. But hopefully that will get addressed sooner than later through the course of this forum. I'm gonna turn it back to Michelle. And I also want to give a special thank you to Black Swan Academy. We do have Raven Carter, who is our youth co-host. And while they're not an official sponsor of this event, they have been very helpful, giving feedback on the questions and, providing us with a youth host who will, we can't do any of this without our youth. And so it's really important that we have, Raven's participation, and please honor her questions as legit and valid as any other questions that will be asked on this forum. And I know that goes without saying. Thank you, everybody.
So friends, if you are able to stream from your Facebook page, we are also sharing this on an open public page on Facebook, We the Motherhood. And you can find that there. If you are not connected directly to Chioma Oru, you can go to that page on Facebook and share this out to your networks and start a watch party. And let's let the community know what we're talking about and what we care about. So let's start with some questions. How about that? So I'm gonna throw this out. And I think I'm gonna start with Miss Thompson because she was the first one to say, hey, how do we take these questions? You ready, Miss Thompson? Miss Thompson. Oh, wait, hold on, Chioma. I think I skipped this section. We are supposed to do introductions. I'm sorry, I got so excited about chatting, getting the questions going. I do want to have the candidates make their brief introduction with their top 3 priorities. I am really jumping the gun. And so, Ms. Thompson, since you probably have unmuted your mic, please, can you get us started with the candidate introduction, stating your top 3 priorities, keeping in mind our time constraints. We do have quite a number of participants today.
Sure. Thank you for hosting this today. My name is Ebony Rose Thompson. I'm running for the Ward 7 seat on the State Board of Education. I think first and foremost, it's important to say that my neighborhood school now was my neighborhood school when I was a kid. I'm someone who believes that if given the right opportunities and education, like I have, kids don't have to worry about making it out of their community. They'll be able to make it back to their community. I want to make that true for all kids. I'll say that I have been the chair of the Ed Council since 2012. I was a 3-term ANC commissioner, and I'm someone who volunteers in my community in other capacities. As far as my top 3 priorities to make that happen, they are absolutely focusing resources on students and communities with the greatest need. They're providing transparency in budgeting and decisions. And it's expanding the quantity and quality of programs in our schools in Ward 7. So thank you again for having me. Again, my name is Ebony Rose Thompson, and I'm running for the Ward 7 seat in the State Board of Education.
Thank you so much, Ms. Thompson. Who'd like to go next? I'll call Mr. Perry, Robbie Perry.
Hello, can you hear me? Hi.
We can.
Thank you very much. Thank you this afternoon for hosting this, for each of the groups hosting this. I have the privilege of being one of your 6 options to choose from on the at-large ballot for the DC State Board of Education. My name is Ravi. I am an educator, lifelong educator. My parent and grandparents were educators, and my aunt taught in DC public schools for 30 years, taught music education. And I'm a professor at Howard. I teach politics, and I consider myself a pragmatic progressive. And my 3 top priorities, pending, of course, further conversation with what matters to each of you, is expanding mandating 21st century curriculum that includes education on disability rights, on LGBTQ history, and on race and ethnic studies, and also closing the digital divide and guaranteeing educational equity by ensuring shared standards across both the public schools and public art. Thank you very much. I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much. And so next I'll call Miss Reed. Carlene Reed, welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Dr. Carlene Reed, and I'm a candidate for State Board of Education here in Ward 8. I'm a special educator with over 15 years of experience in the classroom and making policy for DC government and nationally. And basically just want to use that experience to elevate the quality of our schools in Ward 8, expand on the quality, and get the information out there about the great opportunities that we have in Ward 8. For instance, Baloo has a wonderful automotive technology program that we should be attracting students from all over the city to come to. My 3 priorities are to achieve equity in funding. Our current funding formula does not work. I would actually like to elevate the voice of our local school advisory teams so they can make individualized decisions around funding for their schools. Community engagement, a lot of times there's community engagement when it comes to, unfortunately, violence or development, but getting in those conversations about education in the ward and getting ahead of some issues so that everything is an emergency, but we can really thoughtfully plan some things. And then lastly, excuse me, is thoughtful policy, using the 15 years of experience from the classroom to the state side, working at OSSI, and on the national level with professional organizations, to match that with community voice so that we can really expand the quality of our schools in the ward. So thank you for the opportunity. Again, Dr. Carlene Reed, candidate for State Board of Education in Ward 8.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reed. Karen Williams, welcome, Karen.
Okay, go away, children.
All right, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Welcome, Ms. Williams.
Thank you. My name is Karen Williams. I'm the current Ward 7 representative on the State Board of Education. We work with OSSI, the federal branch of the system, to bring legislative changes to our students in Ward 7 and 8. We have cultivated relationships. I have cultivated relationships with the deputy mayor, Hansel Kong, and the other members who are pertinent to our discussion tonight, so that we can elevate the resources and the other things that the students need, especially those 8 east of the river. I have worked with most of the students. We have created a student advisory system for the State Board of Education so that we can hear directly from students, and we have lots of meetings with the parents so that we can understand their needs. I forgot to say that I was a special education teacher working in DC public schools for several years before I converted to the State Board of Education.
Thank you so much, Ms. Williams. And so next we'll go with Ms. Johnson Law, LaJoy Johnson Law.
Can you guys hear me? All right.
We can hear you.
Hey everybody, my name is LaJoy Johnson Law, candidate for the State Board of Education for the Great Ward 8, but please just call me Miss Law. I've been in the ward for nearly 10 years. I have a 9-year-old who is in 4th grade. So excuse me if I'm frazzled. I've done distance learning all day, so we should talk about that today. But I have nearly a decade of experience in the DC education system. I currently work at Advocates for Justice and Education. We call it AJE, the Parent Training Information Center. And here's my child now coming with her beautiful computer in the middle of my introduction. Bria, since you're here, you might as well be in the introduction too, because that's what it's about. It's about our kids. This is a family-led campaign, and I'm just gonna be brief since she's sitting right here. We've gotta get families elected to the State Board of Education. We can no longer make decisions for families. We have to make decisions with families. And right now we are teaching, educating, drafting, helping, technology and all with our kids. And we have got to make sure, oh, hold on, Abria. We've got to make sure that our families are heard. And we've got to raise up special education. My daughter Abria here was born at 1 pound and 6 ounces. So she was born at 23 weeks. And so, you know, I've seen the disrespect and the disregard for special education, and we have got to just make it parallel. We've got to make it paramount, and we've got to make sure that all of our kids have access to high quality, because I just don't want that for my daughter, but I want it for all my daughters. And thank you all for bearing with me. And this is Abria, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Law. And next, Dontrell Smith. Mr. Smith.
Thank you again for hosting us.
Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you again for hosting us today. These events provide me with an opportunity to learn more about the educational needs of the students, the parents, the educators, and most importantly, the community. I'm Dontrell Smith, a candidate for Ward 7 State Board of Education. I'm also a product of DC Public Schools, product of 6 siblings that graduated from DC Public Schools. I'm a proud parent of DC Public Schools, and I'm committed to changing the trajectory for all students and not just my children. I want to be the voice of our most vulnerable population of our children. My 3 priorities are accountability for our students, teachers, and administrators, transparency in the terms of what our goals are and how we plan to achieve them, and most importantly, education equity, especially during these times so that all students have the same opportunity to learn and excel, especially while distant learning. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Mr. Charles Boston, welcome.
Okay, there we go. Thank you so much. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charles Boston. I'm running for the Ward 7 State Board of Education. I'm running because I've been on the front line of advocating for a lot of our young people for almost 15 years now. And I'm tired of actually doing it from the tail end, meaning working with a lot of troubled youth, working with a lot of adjudicated youth. I believe that we can intervene earlier. And if we look at and focus on some of the core issues and true issues that affect academic achievement, such as nutrition, such as activity, such as economic hardship, I think we'll really address what the underlying problems are. I'm a parent of DC Public School students. I have a 3-year-old and a 13-year-old that are in public schools. And my 3 priorities would be education equity, ensuring that all students had an opportunity to not only receive a quality education, but receive a valued education with more involvement from the community. I think that's one of the biggest things that's missing from our education system is the community element, and it used to be there. And so that's why I would prioritize my focus, getting the community back involved, because it does take a village, and it will take a village to get us to bend this curve. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. And next we'll have the introduction from John Patterson. Welcome, Jacques.
Hello, how are you doing? Thank you for hosting this and having this today. I'm Jacques Patterson. I am a candidate for the at-large position on the State Board of Education. I am a proud Ward 8 resident with 2 lovely children that are in DCPS schools currently. One going in 4th grade and one is matriculating to the 6th grade to middle school. And I'm also a father of an educator who actually teaches in KIPP DC. I also work at KIPP DC. I am the Chief Community Engagement and Growth Officer. Been in that position for over 2 years. I also served as an ANC for 5 terms, 10 whole years, and 8B commission. And so that work is very relevant to what we would like to do as far as raising community voice. And that is one of my top priorities, is elevating the voice of our communities. As was mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that our communities are involved in education. What we're seeing from COVID right now is that we need our community to be involved. We don't want to do it on the back end when a pandemic happens. We want to make sure that they've been involved all along the way. So that's one of my priorities. Another one is teacher retention. Having a daughter that teaches, I know explicitly what they go through on a daily basis to make sure that they have the resources and the support to be effective in their jobs. A lot of teachers are leaving the job because it's difficult and they don't have the support that they need on a regular basis. And we need to make sure that we're having teachers that we need in front of our children and that we have stabilization there, but also focusing on our teachers of color, making sure that we're recruiting more because we have such a low percentage of teachers of color that are in the profession and are staying in the profession. And then, of course, equity in our resources. I've seen over the last couple of budgetary cycles since living in Ward 8, schools like Henley and Turner and a few other schools that are east of the river, I've seen them underfunded dramatically. So we want to make sure there's equity in the funding that we have going forward. And those are the things I'll be working on, specifically trying to focus on east of the river, but at large across the city. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Doc. All right, so next up, like an introduction from Sarah, and I forgive me, Sarah, if I mispronounce your last name, Murata.
Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah.
Did I get it?
Mehrotra.
Mehrotra. Thank you.
Thank you for asking. I appreciate it. It's so nice to be with you all. I am a candidate for Ward 2 Board of Education, and I am the daughter of a special education teacher. I have dedicated my career to education through work in professional development, teaching English as a second language overseas, education research and advocacy. And along the way, I've learned a couple of things that have shaped my priorities. Number one, I've learned that we must bring the voices of those on the ground to the table, to teachers, students, families, and advocates, so that everyone has a say. Number two, resource equity. School funding underlies a lot of the inequities that we see in schools. And so my second priority is making sure that all schools are adequately funded. And third, our return to school after this pandemic cannot be returning to the status quo. My third priority is listening to teachers, students, and families, and making sure that when we do return to school, there's a plan in place to make sure that we are returning to a different school system that serves all of our students and teachers. Thank you. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Mehrotra. Let me get that one. Did I get it?
Mehrotra.
Oh, Mehrotra. Okay. That's one of my pet peeves, you know, making sure that I pronounce names correctly. I like to try to get that right.
Thank you.
Next up, Alistair Chang. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I'm Alistair. And when I was growing up in the area, my dad is an immigrant, first generation. He's also illiterate. And I've spent most of the last 10 years working on literacy issues. And though my dad couldn't teach me how to read, he connected me to the people that could. And that really changed my life. So I'm running for the DC State Board of Education in order to connect students to the holistic support systems that my father worked to provide me access to, even though he couldn't provide those things himself. Immediately what this means is during the pandemic is and a few people have said this, digital inclusion and digital equity. For me, this isn't just a temporary buzzword. I've been working on this with public libraries for the past 10 years as the executive director of a nonprofit called Libraries Without Borders. I've done this work across the US and for the impact I've created in digital equity and inclusion, I've won the Google Impact Challenge and I've won the Library of Congress Literacy Award. I'm also very keen on making sure that every student is connected to school libraries with diverse reading materials. What's important to me about this is not just developing a love of reading, but also promoting 21st century literacies. To me, libraries are not just a stack of books. School libraries are critical in helping students learn information literacy, which, you know, not just distinguishing between primary and secondary sources, but the whole host of how you interpret information. And I think that's more and more important for our democracy as disinformation and deepfakes are spread. If elected, I would also be the first Asian American member of the DC State Board of Education. And, you know, I think to me, this kind of diversity is important to be represented. And as part of this, you know, I would be interested in supporting and catalyzing the development of an ethnic studies curriculum, learning from states like California, but also in supporting the current work right now to improve and adjust the social studies standards to be more inclusive. And this is also work that I've done before, right? I've previously worked with several school libraries and public libraries across the country to diversify their reading collections to reflect their populations of students, both print and in digital. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chang. Next, we'll have James Harnett. Mr. Harnett, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me, and thank you to all the partner organizations that helped put this event on. My name is James Harnett, and I'm running for the Ward 2 seat on the DC State Board of Education this November. And I'm a product of public schools for my entire life. I worked at the Obama administration at the Department of Education in the Office of Educational Technology on making sure that standards and opportunity exists for students across the United States to make sure they have access to not only the educational resources they need to succeed, but educational technology resources that will allow them to succeed in the 21st century. I'm also an ANC commissioner in Foggy Bottom, and for the last 2.5 years, I've been representing the voices of students at George Washington University in our local government and making sure that there's somebody fighting for the voices of our students and our young people in a government that doesn't always listen to our priorities. My top 3 priorities for being on the State Board of Education are first, uplifting and prioritizing the voices and needs of students, making sure that we're fundamentally transforming how we look at both accountability and funding on the DC State Board of Education, how through the mayor's office, we see this sort of universe of accountability that doesn't exist when we're making decisions about things like going back to school or making sure that students have access to resources. And those things, those challenges have existed well before COVID. And we need to fundamentally transform how we address accountability, how we make sure that we have funding for our at-risk and students with disabilities to make sure that we're fighting for success for them in their future. And I think the third most important thing, and something I hope we will talk more about today, is making sure that we don't reopen our schools in person until it's safe, until we have buy-in from folks like the Washington Teachers Union and our teachers and our school administrators and students and folks with disabilities and multi-generational families at home. So I'm looking forward to that conversation, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here. Next, we'll have an introduction, and I feel like I'm going to make a mistake again with the pronunciation. Masiki Valentine? Did I even get close?
That was actually perfect. Hi, everybody. My name is Masiki Valentine, and I'm running for the DC State Board of Education at large. I'm a native Washingtonian and a graduate of DC Public Schools. I've been a teacher and a mentor for over a decade. And in my day job now, I work with DC residents and progressive nonprofits to achieve a DC budget that is racially equitable for all DC residents. I am running because I believe that all DC residents, all DC students deserve fully funded neighborhood schools. This means where our tax dollars actually follow our students. I know that our families deserve a representative that's been in the classroom and on the front lines of advocating for our community needs, not someone who is loyal to corporate educational interests. As it relates to my top 3 priorities, I want to make sure that we are working equitably to close the digital divide. As a board chair for Many Languages, One Voice, I am proud to usher in a youth digital organizing campaign to ensure that immigrant children who are Hispanic and other cultures have access to technology, because we know that they are often left out of the conversation. Also, another priority is to ensure that the DC State Board allows more democracy for families, parents, and students. We've seen what mayoral control has done to our schools. It has closed parents out of meetings. It has made the difficulty of ensuring safety for our students even harder. And we have seen countless school closures ultimately hurting our students. Finally, I want to make sure that if we are moving to implement any outdoor and learning hub spaces, that they are done equitably and that the funding for them is plentiful. As a graduate of River Terrace Elementary School, Ward 7's only special education campus, I am proud to say that I want to make sure that students with disabilities do not have to trudge through mud and political games to ensure they and their parents get the things that they need. I'm excited to be here today, and I thank you for this time to share my vision and can't wait for the conversation ahead.
Thank you so much. Next up, we'll have Christopher Atis. Did I get that right, Christopher?
You got that perfect. Thank you so much.
Outstanding.
And thank you all for having me here today. I'm a father. I'm also a technology guy. I got my master's in computer science and I taught, and I'm running for DC State Board of Education for Ward 2 on a technology platform. I was part of the founding team at a DC-based company called Blackboard, and I spent about 10 years there. One of my large projects while in the product development group was actually making Blackboard accessible, ADA and WCAG compliant. And then I went on to run international business for Blackboard across the world for several years, really experiencing what schools and universities were doing with virtual learning throughout the world, including sending out buses in Brazil to rural villages with very low connectivity to ensure everyone had access to education. And so I'm running because of, at this time, I think I can bring those technology skills to DC to help our kids, our teachers, and our parents alike. So it's a technology platform that I'm running on. I'm also secondly running on bringing more cybersecurity, computer science, and next generation digital skills opportunities to our students to go out and get those jobs. As some of you may know, the Chinese graduate 2 million kids in cybersecurity out of high school each year, 2 million in computer science, 2 million in AI and machine learning. We as a country can do better. And that starts right here in DC. And then third, I'm running on safely opening our schools, using technology, tracking, whatever it takes to make both teachers, parents, and our administrators and our students feel safe. So that I support the DC public schools, I support our charter schools, and I very much support mayoral control of our schools. So I'm Chris. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. And lastly, Miss Dorothy Douglas, you've been waiting. Thank you, Dorothy, for your patience. Please, welcome.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, good afternoon or good evening, everyone. I just say it's a blessing to be here. I'm a native Washingtonian, and also I'm a grandparent, foster parent, and I'm a native Washingtonian as well as I'm a DC graduate of UDC, and also I was born here in the District of Columbia. So I've been in education for over, I think, 40 years. I started out as an ANC commissioner, and it took me 10 years to get my degree in education, and I found it. So I just wanted to say, I know I'm hearing everybody talking about the things that we should have, the things I feel that we should have is already in place. And the problem is that we have to make city council and the RC and everybody be accountable. Because what the problem is that the transparency is what's really missing for our kids of learning. So my main topic is the well-being of our children, making sure they get education in a proper manner, also that they have the mental health and the basic health behavior sources and resources in school for our kids to get these services. And also my other concern is the parents' priorities. And a lot of times we're not being clear or bringing the parents to the table to make sure that the voices are being heard and things are fall in order. And I just wanted to say, I also was on the modification program when I was at the State Board of Education. I was the first State Board of Education for Ward 7 woman to be elected to State Board of Education in Ward 7. And I was also on the monitor board, the monitoring board for Blue and other schools in the District of Columbia. And what I've seen from my experience when they did the closing of the schools, a lot of our kids had to go 5 miles or more. And my granddaughter, which I have now with my grandkids that I'm taking care of in school, she had to travel every day 5 miles to get to school. And to me, I felt that the school should have never been, need to keep neighborhood schools. And that's caused the problem of our kids not getting a proper education and making sure they get the resources that they need to be successful. So I'm really happy that I have an opportunity to be here to speak. But the main thing, we as leaders, and we need to come together to make sure that all our resources and our family have the services that they need so that all our kids can learn and strive and be successful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Is there anyone who joined that I missed? I believe we've covered everyone that's here from a candidate perspective, but is there anyone who did not have an opportunity to introduce themselves? Outstanding. So from here, I'd like to give the mic to Miss Raven Carter and have her introduce herself. She is my co-facilitator and will also be presenting some questions from the Voice of Youth. Raven?
All right, hello everyone. My name is Raven Carter. I'm a youth activist for Black Swan and also a 2020 graduate from public and charter schools. All right, so first question is, school districts across the country have begun opening learning hubs to provide in-person care and learning support for low-income and at-risk children. As a potential Sboe member, what is your position on these efforts, and would you support bringing similar hubs to DC PCS and DC public charter schools? All right, first up, we will have Dorothy Douglas.
Well,
Ms. Douglas, before you go, I would like to just present that other, we have some questions that we've already put together, but we also want parents and families, if you're in the group with us today, to please put your questions in the chat so that we may present your questions as well. We have some questions, but we want to know what your questions are. So if you would please put them in the chat, and we will pull questions in from the chat in addition to the questions that have already been prepared.
I just want to say,
Ms. Douglas, you can proceed to respond to Ms. Carter's
Can I say,
question.
Michelle, can I say something real quick? Hi, everyone. This is Lindsay. Just a reminder to the candidates, you have 2 minutes to speak. Most of you stuck with that the last time. A few of you went over. I'm going to be monitoring again. So 2 minutes. Thank you.
oh, hello. Well, I'm just going to say I'm not too well working with the chat because I have some issues with that. I'm still learning too about technology, so you all have to bear with me answering the questions as I present them. I appreciate that. Well, I think that the hub is almost basically to DC public school curriculum from K to 12. It's just like the what we're doing now with the virtual learning at home, and the main thing that they're dealing with now that I think is a great idea for the hubs to be there is technology, because our kids are actually learning from technology, from computers. And so by all this coming together, it's already in place. And so to me, it's kind of like it's already in place, but it's just not out for a lot of parents to understand what the hubs is. So really talking about reinforcing the skills that's already in the school system and that the parents and we all need to follow from K to 12. So I think the hubs are a very good program, because as I said earlier, relating to what we're teaching now with virtual learning at home. Hello?
Right.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Douglas. Ms. Carter, did you want to pose that to anyone else particularly, or did you just want to open the floor?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
Did you want to pose that question again to anyone else specifically, or did you just want to open the floor to see who would be interested?
Yes, just open the floor. So anyone would like to answer the question?
I'll be happy to go.
All right.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
We can.
Again, my name is Robbie Perry, and I'm running at-large school board. So look, I mean, this is a very important issue. We call them learning hubs here in DC in public schools and here in the DMV region at large and for other districts nearby. Nationwide, this is often called experiential learning. I believe I'm the only candidate in the at-large race that has actually implemented experiential learning in education. To me, this is simply has to be mandated at every grade level for the ages that are appropriate, and the funding needs to be there for every single school to implement it for every student. And that means that teachers need to be given the resources for them to have the tools necessary to execute the learning hub and educational experience. This is just what you have to do to be a 21st century school district that ensures that every single student not only survives and get by but that actually thrives and is able to compete with the global marketplace that is the capital of this world that we live in today. So to me, that has to be expanded, has to be funded. And by the way, we can do this. The money is there. And so the reticence to do it is just simply is about politics. And we have to put the students, the resources, and the teachers first in order to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Raven, Mr. Valentine has posted he'd like to answer this question as well.
Yes, thank you. I believe I saw Ebony Rose question whether or not we should raise our hands. So she may want to address this before me, but if she's okay, I will take it over.
Oh, I do see that.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson, do you want to go first, or you want to go ahead and let Mr. Valentine go ahead and finish?
No, Masiki can go. He was already unmuted. And then I'll answer after him. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Misaki Valentine. And as I stated in my introduction, I'm in favor of learning hubs and outdoor learning space. Last week, I had the opportunity to be in a webinar with Empower Ed, who laid out the format and what this looks like. And actually, some of the facts presented that outdoor learning space was cheaper than the HVAC systems that have not been put in some of the DCPS schools. And I bring that up specifically because I am concerned, and a lot of other parents are concerned about the equitability aspect. We know that there's plenty of space in DC, but we want to make sure that that space is safe for learning for students, and that all students have access to it in the same time frame as any other students, and that those with disability have access to that space as well. And so I think that this is going to take a real collaborated effort, not just with DC government, who we need 100%, and not just from the DC State Board of Education, but we need community partners. We need our parks and recreation centers. We need people who have empty land space and lots and DPR to help us usher this in, so that way our children can have an outdoor experience that pushes the development of their growth.
All right. Thanks for that, Mr. Valentine. Next, we will have, I'm sorry, is it Ebony who would like to go first, or Carlene Reed? I'm sorry. Ebony Rose?
Yeah, I'll chime in now. Raven, I'm actually glad you asked that question. I had a conversation recently when I went to the bank. I went into the bank, and I'm one of those people who will talk to somebody in the grocery line. But the bank teller, she actually has a young son, and she was sharing with me that she just felt like it was absolutely unfair that schools weren't opening, and that it took so long for the mayor to make a decision. My response to her was a couple of things. One, yeah, she was right. It did take us too long to make a decision. And yes, it is absolutely unfair that this is falling on parents and families because it's not their fault. But what's also true is that I don't know a parent, including my own, and when I think about my own sister, who doesn't want their kid to be safe. We did not, as a city, put in place the things we needed to make sure kids could go back to school safely. I know that as someone who was a member of the reopening committee and pushed for certain things around PPE, around facilities, around being able to just staff and social distance appropriately. So when asked if like learning hubs are our option, it's actually something I shared with her. We can't mandate as SBOE members to make DCPS or public charter schools to do that. But what we can do as people who are connected to our communities is identify resources. There are grants for families like that can go directly to individuals around learning hubs. There are spaces in our community, like Masiki shared, that could be opened up. There are a lot of people who care about what happens to our kids and don't want people to be disconnected from schools, and absolutely understand that not everybody can work from home. And even if you can work from home, you may not want your kid in the back of the Zoom meeting doing whatever they need to do. So I absolutely support the idea of learning hubs, but I also support that as people who care about our city and care about kids, that we make the resources available to make that an option for all parents.
All right, thank you for that. Next, we will have 1 second. Next we will have, I'm sorry, Sarah. Sorry, it's hard to pronounce your last name. Please.
That's okay.
Correct me.
Sarah Mehrotra, and I'm running for Ward 2. Thank you so much for the question, Raven. And I would like to reiterate what Ebony and Mysinki have said about using public spaces, right? This is an opportunity for us to use and work with and collaborate with our parks and recreation centers and other facilities, because if we don't establish learning hubs, right, we risk our students, we risk perpetuating inequities in access to instruction. And so they present an opportunity to not only facilitate instruction, but also they present an opportunity for parents and families of English language learners and students with disabilities to get additional resources, right? Additional assistance with using technology, additional assistance about school resources. They provide an opportunity to offer mental health supports, because we know that so many students and families are experiencing stress and trauma due to COVID-19. They also present opportunities for students to gain access to meals. And so I want to reiterate that establishing learning hubs that are accessible around the city and that are near workplaces of parents and families is critical. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next we will have Carlene Reed.
Thank you, Raven. And I support for the many reasons that some of the other candidates mentioned, but I would just kind of like to iterate that I've taken action actually around learning hubs. I met a young man at Martha's Table at the height of the pandemic who was bringing his distance learning packets from Johnson Middle School to Martha's Table to get assistance. And it kind of just was like, I was thinking to myself, like, okay, we're basically, this is what it is already. Like, this is a learning hub. He's coming here to get help with the packet. So we were able to do that, you know, safely and with social distance. So I've actually testified already at the State Board of Education hearing in May regarding how we can use our community spaces to get activated around learning hubs. I've also taken action by helping NARC Cure the Streets with creating a survey for violence interrupter parents to explore learning hubs and their needs for education to basically develop a plan. So I'm not only supporting it, but action is my thing. So basically I've already started taking some action around that.
All right, thank you for that, Ms. Reed. Next we will have James Harnett.
Thank you for that question, Raven. And I appreciate your participation in this event, because I think it's really important that we uplift the voices and priorities of students in this conversation. I certainly believe that we need to be doing all we can to support families and students, especially those of frontline workers, of hospital staff, of those who bag groceries, folks that are from low-income families and at-risk families, to make sure they have access to the resources they need, especially for our youngest children, the ones you can't really put in front of a computer and expect them to get the educational value out of a virtual DCPS school year without actually being in person. And I think that it's really important that in order for that to be successful, in order for our special education teachers, for our teachers of young kids, and for our early learning centers, we need to make sure that we're listening to, prioritizing, and implementing the requirements, the priorities, and the voices of teachers as we look at opening, whether it's in an in-person building, whether it's out in a park, whether it's utilizing a DPR facility, to make sure that we're making sure that folks don't feel unsafe, and that we don't have a situation where folks don't feel like they're being listened to and heard. I think that's one of the really great works that the State Board has done in the last few months, is turning over a lot of their meetings to hear from students, to hear from teachers, to hear from folks in the community who have ideas about how we come back. But we've seen that the mayor's office and that OSSI and the deputy mayor for education and the chancellor haven't been listening to those priorities. We didn't have teachers that were transparently communicating with the mayor around our proposed reopening. And the fact that we didn't have those voices, we didn't have those parents' voices, we didn't have those students' voices or those teachers' voices in that conversation, and we didn't have accountability and transparency in that process, meant that we now find ourselves in this conversation of how do we make sure that we're supporting folks without leaving anyone behind. And that's something that I'm going to fight for as a member of the State Board of Education if I'm elected in Ward 2.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Harnett. Next, we will have Charles Boston. Mr. Boston,
Okay.
are you?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I think the learning hubs are a great idea. First of all, you know, we have to realize that schools are social institutions first. And so ideally what the learning hubs do is they allow the teachers and students to get out. As long as everything is properly spaced and following CDC classroom guidelines or space lines, I think that's really one of the only ways that you can ensure attendance, which is a conversation that really hasn't been talked about, as well as learning. I mean, distance learning has been a disaster since March. It's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And so there's been a lot of learning loss. And so in addition to trying to regain some of that learning that has been lost, it also allows teachers as well as students to get out the house. You know, cabin fever is real. And so learning hubs will have a lot of benefits that's, you know, not even intention, such as good exercise, as well as being able to relieve some stress, which is definitely needed for most students and staff members.
All right, thank you for your answer, Mr. Boston. Next, we will have Dontrell Smith.
Thank you. My name is Dontrell Smith. I'm running for Ward 7 State Board of Education. You know, one of the things that's not discussed are our most vulnerable students within the district. You know, those are the students that are homeless, you know, foster care population and special needs who have IEPs, 504 plans, and other special needs. You know, while we focus on, has been on the general population, what about the special needs and the other students who need specialized care? I mean, the learning hub may work for this group of children and their caregivers who still need additional support that we got to take into account for. And of course, we got to work in the coordination with the CDC as well as any other Department of Health and guidelines to ensure the safety of everyone. But we got to focus on the ones that need it most importantly.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Smith. Next, we will have Alistair Chang.
Great, thanks. One aspect that I would like to add about the value of a learning hub, for me, is the way that it spreads the work across the community rather than relying solely on schools alone to fix everything, right? I have been a visiting researcher at UNESCO's Institute for Lifelong Learning, where I've been studying how informal and non-formal learning opportunities support schools, the formal learning experience. And what this means is that, and what the research is showing is that community partners, families, a host of actors have really critical roles to play to support schools, to support families, and to support students. And for me, this is not just something theoretical, right? I shared my story already. I wouldn't be literate today if not for those support networks that my dad was able to connect me to. And over the last 10 years, I've been working on building these kinds of partnerships across formal, non-formal, and formal learning providers in over a dozen countries now and over a dozen states across the US, including in DC.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Chang. Lastly, we will have LaJoy Johnson Law.
All right, thank you so much, you guys. And I just want to thank everyone for being here. Abria kind of took over my introduction. But I know we've been talking about students with disabilities, and we just need to remember that each family has a different situation. And if we're not coming up with an actionable plan that families are actually making with decision makers, i.e. DCPS, and the individual LEAs, then it's not going to work. We might have to come up with creative solutions that are going on at the same time to meet families and individual needs. As a mom of a child with a disability on an IEP, do I really want her to go to a learning hub? Do I really want her to go to school? I really, really, really do. but we also need to remember that there's some children that have chronic respiratory conditions. And so, thank you so much, Abria. And so they may not be able to go to a learning hub. And so what are they supposed to do? You know, they could still be at risk. And I've planned a funeral for my child because she was born so early. I'm not planning another one. So before we make any decisions with anybody, before we take action with anybody, we need to make sure that we are talking to families. We need to make sure that we are talking to parents, because there is nobody here with my daughter but myself. There is no one here with our children but us. And we have got to make sure that if we're going to create these hubs, that we're creating them with families. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you for that. Is there anyone else that I missed that would also like to answer this question? No? Okay, I will pass it back to my co-host, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Raven. It's so wonderful to have the voice of the youth with us. It's important that we understand their role and what we need to come out of our candidates here in the State Board of Education. So we really appreciate your participation. I'm gonna, to ensure that we do get some questions in from parents, I am gonna throw a question in that came in from a parent, if I can find it again. And so now this parent is a parent of an autistic child. And I think one of the comments that came up during the various dialogues that we've had is about being able to have more programs that support special education youth as they age. They may not be they may not have job readiness upon graduation. So the question to the candidates in terms of where you stand on this component of what special needs students require all the way through they mature out of eligibility for services, right? So the question is, will there be more programs on the educational component to support these particular students, especially when they are not ready for a job?
Michelle, can you repeat that one more time? I'm sorry, because that was a lot in that question. I just want to make sure.
I try to preface it a little. So in the context of the fact that eligibility for special education is not till 17 or 18 when the average student matriculates from their senior year of high school, right? So the question is, more associated with, at that point, that student is an adult. When you have an adult special education student who is not ready to go out into the workforce, what are the what additional educational programming would you guys propose be available or made available for those students so that they can continue to be supported until they are having increased their job readiness stance? LaJoy, since you asked me for that clarification, I give this one to you first.
This is what happens when you ask clarifying questions.
That is what happens. Thank you, Ms. Law.
Yes. Okay. I know I got 2 minutes, so I'll be brief. So the first thing that we have to look at is where the child is under IDEA, because you can go up until 22. And what we could do when we're talking about programs, we need to really tap into non-publics. The State Board of Education, they advise OSSE, and OSSE oversees the non-public schools. And the non-public schools have some amazing programs. Working at AJE, we have been to some of them. I'm thinking about Ivy Mount. They just have some really great resources. So what we could do is partner with the non-public schools that are serving the children that already have some of the job and training programs to really come up with comprehensive solutions. And then again, to also ask families, well, what is it that your child or adult child needs? And to also make sure that we're raising the student's voice, the adult student's voice about what they would like to see and what they need. Thank you.
Awesome. Oh, I see Mystique Valentine.
Can I say something?
Can you guys use your raise hand icon?
Can you see me?
Yeah.
I can see you, sir.
Okay, that's not me. That's Miss Douglas. Sorry.
Thank you.
That's Miss Douglas.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, Miss Douglas.
I'm really not feeling well. Like I said, I had death in my family. Y'all just have to forgive me because I got a lot on my mind, but I just didn't want to miss the program. So I apologize. And thank you, Miss Valentine, for recognizing me. Thank you so much, dear.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ms. Douglas.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Valentine, you want to proceed with this one?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I want to start by saying that my platform is specifically run on making sure that we open up a public education system for all students. As a teacher, I've been able to see parents fight legal battles about what's necessary for their students who have IEPs and who are under IDEA. And what I know is that the more that we allow our public schools to go underfunded, the more that we allow students with disabilities to have, you know, gaps in resources that they need. So first of all, I would like to say I'm in favor of a fully funded educational system that is public for all students. So that way, public charters or public charters don't have the ability to let our students go when they can no longer fit the need. As it relates to job readiness, I personally believe that all schools, and there should be systems throughout DC that connect students with vocational learning opportunities, regardless of their background, socioeconomic status, or any mental or physical disabilities that they may have. This is very important if we want stable communities, if we want to build communities that are upon empathy, and if we want to make sure that our students are ready. So I fully support a system that fosters growth for students who have disabilities, who are under IEPs, and to make sure that they have continuously funded vocational experiences and educational opportunities throughout their adulthood.
Thank you so much. Ms. Thompson, did you want to chime in on that one too?
Yes, please. So I actually think something Alistair said was important about his family being able to connect him to resources, like no matter what their background was and no matter what their education was. It's important to educate parents on what resources are out there. Currently, DCPS actually teaches classes like independent living skills and self-advocacy for students with disabilities, especially those who are working to earn a certificate or IEP. With those soft skills, that's really what helps them transition to be productive members of society. They can actually start to participate in those classes as early as middle school. I share that not because one class is the end all be all, but I share that because there are a lot of resources available that we need to make sure as people who care about education that families know about and have access to. Because one part of the equation is like, are our schools fully funded, fully resourced? Do they have everything that they need? And the other part of the equation is, do people know enough to access those? And are we sharing, are we taking our responsibility to share those resources with people? The last thing I'll say is that I have a cousin actually who, when she graduated from high school, she had an IEP. And her mom worked really hard to make sure when she went on to college, that she also had those services and accommodations. Those things are important too, that we know how to support our kids, whether they're going into college, career, or whatever pathway they choose. IEP, SPED, any student, and that we make sure we're using the resources that are available to us.
Thank you so much, Ms. Thompson. Sir, I saw you smiling when this question came up. Did you want to take this one?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, sure, sorry. I think just what I'll add to Ebony's point about communication, right, is one way we can really strengthen our transition services is by community partnerships, partnering with business leaders, with other companies and stores around DC, right, which will not only, we can collaborate with them not only to support students in their transition and help them with vocational training, but also it spreads the word, right? It's community investment in all of our students. And that's one of my priorities as well. Thank you, Michelle.
Absolutely. Dr. Reed, did I see you raise your hand?
But for the sake of time, I'm going to pass in the sense of Sarah kind of mentioned what I was going to mention, in the sense that we got to get our community kind of prepared to start serving some of our children with special needs. So getting our kids with special needs and their families connected with community-based organizations, and having those community-based organizations understand the needs and understand the supports that they'll need around work I will, well, maybe I won't pass. Also, I will say, right now we do start the transition plan early. But again, that's this decision with families in the sense of, can we start, exploring the child's interest early to see what vocations they may be interested in, to see what career pathways they may be exploring, and then getting the community and the family engaged early to pursue that plan so that when they come out, they'll have more quality options of places to work and go.
Thank you. That's a mood at large. Jacques? Oh, I saw you just put your finger up. Hey, Jacques.
I appreciate that. I think what we're talking about here is also a missed opportunity here. As our children are transitioning out at the age of 22, we need to start very early on to try to partner with the Workforce Investment Council, which actually our former Deputy Mayor, Anna Smith, is actually there as the executive director. We don't have the type of partnerships with that organization to make sure that our children are actually getting ready for jobs that are in the marketplace that works directly with businesses. So we need to start early on, way before they get to this age, to make sure that we have a partnership and a program to transition them out. So I think there's a missed opportunity where we as a State Board of Education, getting together with the Workforce Investment Council to make sure our children have the opportunities and a nice transition into jobs that will help them as they transition out the program.
Yes. Ms. Williams, I saw your hand.
Yes, I would just like to piggyback on Jacques' statement, because we've talked about this many times, but there are a lot of agencies out there, like DC Public Charter Schools, but like the Washington Literacy Council and other organizations will take in and help our students transition from transition into organizations that can help them be mature, have jobs, and serve their community in ways that they wouldn't if they didn't have that experience.
Thank you. Mr. Harnett?
Thanks for that question and for giving me the opportunity to respond. I find this to be a really personal conversation, because for my entire public school life, I was an IDEA student with an IEP. And I know how hard my parents fought to make sure that I had those resources and a fully funded IEP throughout my entire educational life. And that was a real fight, not only in making sure that that funding, as Miziki noted, was available and ready for any student that needed it, but also that the data and information about what schools delivered on that specific resource were available to our community. And one of the big challenges that I see in how the district addresses this is our failure, I think, in making those resources available to folks through the STAR framework. We don't have the resources that we need that we're sharing with families through the STAR reporting platform and our ability to educate folks about the schools that exist in the district. And the mayor's office and folks often talk about how it's this great platform to help families get educated about their neighborhood schools, about schools that are available to them across the city. And I think that it's really important that we look at not only how we make sure that folks are ready once they leave school to succeed in the workforce, but that they actually know of the resources that exist in their schools and that we're making those tools available to everybody, whereas the current system that we have now just isn't working for families.
Oh, I'm on mute because my little person came in the background, because I have coworkers at home and who like the camera. May I, Mr. Perry, I was calling on you, and but you didn't hear me because I was muted. So, sir, the mic is yours.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I will answer this quickly. I tried to. So I was born in preemie, so I was assumed to have had every disability, every illness as possible. God made other plans, and so of course I'm grateful for that. But I understand the precariousness that parents go through every single day in ensuring that their child has every resource cared for. So I support everything that's been said here. I haven't heard one bad idea yet in this entire forum. The issue, I think, is not just good ideas or, for example, resource allocation, but it's also about resource distribution, and it's about changing the policies to make the actual government work for the people. And so when I hear people say, for example, that we can't do something, that's literally the opposite of what my own urban public school mother taught me, and she had a sign in her English classroom that literally had the can't word crossed out. We can mandate disability rights education. We can mandate ethnic studies education. We can mandate LGBTQ history and all these other kinds of issues. It requires us to cut through the interconnected web of education ecosystem that is the bureaucratic red tape of DC. It's more complicated here than any other region in the country, and we need people on the board who know how to cut through that and actually make these good ideas policy. I have a record of doing that. And by the way, when we're talking about disability, I think it's just important to emphasize that disability includes physical disabilities and the hidden ones that are not physical, that people experience each and every day, that may or may not be very obvious, that are just as important, if not more so.
Thank you. I'm going to pass it back to Raven to open up a new question to the floor. Raven?
I didn't get an opportunity to say anything about that. I wanted to say something else possible about the about what you just addressed. Real quickly.
I'm so sorry, Miss Douglas, please.
Okay, what I want to say, everybody has spoken very well, and I think they're actually right. And I just want to say, I have 2 grandkids that had a disability. Matter of fact, one be 22 next month. So I've gone through the school year with him, and what I find out when I'm meeting with the staff or the team that they had with IEP is that a lot of times they don't even know what the resources are available. They don't even know what's available to, for the children or the person to get the service that they're entitled to. So that's the main thing. I think we need to have workshops that will be very helpful to our parents to know what's actually where the funds are, Title I funds or Education Act. So all those things are kind of like held back. We need to know how much money are in the budget for those children that need these educational tools to be successful in life. And the problem is that we're not aware of that. So there's not enough transparency, and there's not enough information that needs to come out. A little pamphlet would be great, so the parents can follow, and the parents need to come to the table. Not only at the time when we're going to have a meeting with the teachers or the children making their plan, they need to do that beforehand. Not wait until October the 1st, the fiscal year, to find out how much is in the budget. They already have an idea what the budget is like. But the problem is that they always shuffling the money the wrong places. They give it to who they want to have and leave them taking the money from the children. They all need resources. Programs are out here, Marshall Heights, and also like the gentleman was saying, the workforce with Mr. Tom Brown and other programs are here. They need to be made aware of what's going on. If you don't give them an opportunity, or don't reach out and say help, they won't come in. The problem is that we're not communicating with the right people to get the resources out there for family to have. Because when I was PTA president of Columbia Heights Education, they had a resource, and I was on the board. That board went out and got funds for those kids that had special needs, and they made sure that everything that they had, they didn't have any problems. The parents was aware of what's going on. And I know these public schools have people already in place that can serve our children, that have these skills, and they're just not serving it. You can't pick and choose, I'm gonna give this, and the special need kids and the ones with the low incomes are the ones that are suffering, and taking the money away from our kids, which they did for Columbia Heights. They were
Ms. Douglas, I'm sorry, you've gone over time, and I hate to have to cut you off because it was so good.
I just want to say we need to be all involved to make these decisions that we need for our children.
Thank you. Mr. Boston, I think I saw you raise your hand. You want to jump in on this question?
Real quick, and I'll let it go. Yeah, I think, one of the problems is the advocacy just hasn't been there by the educational leadership within the ward,
right?
Specifically Ward 7. a lot of these programs, if you go back to, my parents went to school in the district in the 50s and 60s. And so if you go back to any of the schools prior to Brown versus Board of Education, even up into the mid 90s, the district had very robust vocational training programs, and parents had school choice, public school. And so it's just, you know, getting those policies back open, back available, return a democratic choice to parents. And we'll be able to address some of these issues, but the programs are already there. The policies are already there. They just have to be enforced. Thank you.
Reinforcement. Thank you.
Yeah, Dontrell and Alistair, I realized I didn't catch you guys either. Did either of you want to jump in on this question before we moved on?
We can move on. I saw a couple more questions in the chat, so don't want to spend too much on this topic. I think everyone touched on it.
Alistair, your thoughts? Did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think the one thing I would add is that I think this also has to do with kind of taking what we've discussed so far, right? It's not just about what happens after education, formal education is ended, but part of the incentive structure of how our education is structured to perform to the test makes very little room to customize and individualize learning, right? And I think, I know you have a STAR question later, so I won't get too into the weeds here, but I do think that it's difficult for teachers that I've spoken to, and you know, my mom's a teacher, my husband is a teacher, to be able to really provide these kinds of services in a way that won't penalize the teacher, right? And I think that's something we structurally need to change in order to be able to provide customized learning opportunities.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else that that we may have missed that wanted to jump in on that last question before Raven introduces a new question to the forum? Going once, going twice? Okay, Raven, let's introduce a new question to the forum. And remember, guys, we have 2 minutes per answer. We have quite a few more questions, and we would like to get to a couple of more questions before we are at time. Raven.
All right, next question will be, what is your view of what makes a quality school, and how would you use your position on the Sboe to fight for that vision for all students in the district? All right, who would like to answer that question first? Ms. Rose? I mean, Ms. Thompson, sorry.
No worries. Am I, oh, okay. I was trying to make sure I unmuted myself. I think I've been actually quite blessed as somebody who's gone to school in Ward 7. And I think that's really shaped my view of what a quality school looks like. I think about going to elementary school at Plummer and having experienced teachers. 2 of my teachers actually also taught my mom. I think about going to school at Ron Brown when it was Roper, and having a math teacher who had really high expectations of us. I think about going to the seat school and having opportunities like being able to travel to Greece in high school, or having an internship, touring colleges, and having things like AP and SAT prep. I cite those things because it is important to know what a school looks like, and it looks like at different levels. I think the thing that's beautiful about that is my sisters, my cousin also went to school with me, and we all have had different paths in life. I have one sister who actually she just left actually the NMOC, the Blacksonian, if you will. So she's a historian. I have another sister who does arts management, and my third sister actually is studying like IT. We were all prepared to do different things. And for me, a quality school isn't just about one path. It's about making sure our kids have whatever path works for them, that they're resourced in that way, and that they're able to choose careers that will pay them a wage that will let them stay in the city, raise families in the city, and just be able to thrive. So that's my vision for a quality school, and I'm grateful to have had many of those experiences myself.
All right, thank you for that, Ms. Thompson. Next, we'll have Robbie Perry.
I appreciate the opportunity as well. Thank you for this great question. I'm a product of private, parochial, and public education. And I have worked in both urban and rural environments, white and Black schools, large and small. And I emphasize that because that has given me a wealth of ideas that are not my ideas. I don't own these ideas. These are ideas that I have learned through a life of following footsteps where God has led me throughout my life to here, my home in DC. And that has assured me that what every single classroom has to have, one, you have to have the resources from the teacher in order to do the job. No learning happens without the teacher having the resources to actually facilitate that learning. It's very simple there. And those resources include their professional and personal compensation packages and healthcare and family leave, things that really facilitate the best learning opportunity environment for them. And then for the students themselves, we have to restructure everything from the ground up to ensure that the classroom itself, from the way the room is organized, to the resources inside the room, to the way in which we are measuring critical learning inside the actual tools that we apply in the learning environment. And so a quality school, you'll be able to see the real outcomes when your child comes home and is sitting at the dinner table and is having conversation and you're going over homework together as a family. That's a quality school. And the only way you get there for every student, and not just some who are able to be in certain districts because of financial circumstances, is that you require individualized learning. You do not teach to the test. You do not have too much focus on teacher retention and on metrics of a flawed system that needs to be reevaluated and reestablished to begin with. And so if we focus on individual learning, we provide AP, we provide better resources for ELL and disability services, and for trans students, and for foreign language and music and art, all those things have to be in every single classroom. Right now, students have access to it, yes, and classes are taught, yes, but it's not universal, and we don't have a good system to ensure that every single student actually learns that material. When we shake their hand, they walk across that stage and head to a classroom like mine at the college level, where many students are frankly just too far unprepared.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Perry. Next, we will have Carlene Reed. I would just ask you again to please be mindful of your 2-minute mark also.
Yes, Raven, I just set my timer. So the mission of the State Board of Education is to make sure that students are able to excel in college and career, and/or career. So quality schools are basically what will make sure that all of our students can have opportunities to excel in either category, either pathway they choose, and become the neighbors that we want them to be in DC. I think the elements of that are one, quality instruction. So teachers who are really strong in their pedagogy, who have love and care, but then also who are culturally competent. I think learning materials and access to adequate learning materials is key. And also the school environment, is the place safe to go in? Is it, basic things like heating and cooling? So I raised those 3 things because I think it shows that the whole system is involved in that. It shows us the teacher level, the school level, as well as what DC government and us as a community are kind of responsible for, all kind of contributing to make sure our schools are considered quality.
Thank you for that, Ms. Reed. Next, we will have James Harnett. I'm sorry, can you correct me with your last name?
It's Harnett, but thank you for that.
Thank you.
I think it's incredibly important and one we need to be talking about as a community and as a city as we think about who we want to vote for in November. To me, a quality school is one that respects its teachers, makes sure that they have access to the resources they need to grow and learn in their own role, one that uplifts and prioritizes students' mental health and their growth, and one that equitably funds every student and school in this city to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to succeed. And it's one where students with disabilities have access to the resources and opportunities they need to thrive, and where everybody's voices are heard, respected, and fought for. And I think that we don't have that system today in this city. And the State Board of Education is an advisory body. What we need is an oversight and a policy body, because when people go to the polls in November and they vote for somebody under State Board of Education, they assume that we have some semblance of control over how we reopen our schools. And so as I'm campaigning, I'm getting questions from folks about what I want to do to fix these things. And there's a ton of things that I want to do differently. And there are a ton of things that I want to prioritize and uplift as we move forward. But we have to recognize that structurally, the State Board of Education is not in a place where we can mandate those things happen. And so we need to pursue structural, fundamental reform to how we look at education and transparency and accountability in this city. I've done that as an ANC commissioner in fighting for the voices of students and uplifting their priorities in local government. I'm one of the youngest ANC commissioners ever. And that's something that I want to be able to accomplish for our students and for our families on the State Board of Education.
All right, thank you. Next, we will have LaJoy Johnson-Law.
All right, thank you so much, Raven. All right, y'all, my phone just died. So someone please go stop at 2 minutes. But this means a lot to me because right now, Mabria is in the 4th grade and she is a child that has multiple disabilities. And so I am looking for a school for her to go right now for middle school. And one of the biggest things that I think we need to do as far as quality in our schools is who is engaging families and who is valuing families and who is valuing our teachers, because teachers and families are. Okay, you can go now. Can I finish my question? You taking up my 2 minutes. Come on, Equity. I'm trying to get you a middle school girl. I think Abria has answered for me. But we have to make sure that, thank you, Abria. Thank you. Thank you. I think I'm going into my 2 minutes. Y'all just bear with, I'm a mom first, y'all. Like, I just need everyone on here to understand it. I am a mom first. Distance learning is kicking my butt. And when I look at quality, I want someone to value me and my daughter. Thank you, Abria. I want someone to value her IEP. I want someone to value family voice. I don't want us to just look at test scores and to look at the data. Hold on, Abria. You know, the State Board of Education, they're the voices in public education. And how can we effectively talk about quality and equity when we don't even have a Black parent on the State Board of Education? So let's start there when we talk about equity, when we talk about quality. We need to make sure that we have perspectives at the table to talk about these things. And we need to make sure that we're having holistic approaches to all of our teachers, families, and our students, academically, emotionally, mentally, and holistically. So when we look at quality, we need to look at family engagement. We need to look at teacher engagement and teacher retention. We need to look at our students and where they are. We need to look at meeting families where they are. We need to look at special education. And then honestly, we need to make sure that the resources are there getting to the schools. Our schools can't have quality if we're not funding them properly. So y'all pray for me as I look for an equitably quality school come middle school. Hi, everyone. Someone please mute me.
All right. Thank you for that, Ms. Law. Next, we will have Jack Patterson. Jack.
Thank you, and tell Abria hi for me, LaJoy. I know she wants to speak and everything. And love her dearly. I know I've heard a lot of theoretical answers to this, but I'm gonna speak specifically from being a parent who had to make this choice, and like many parents who make it every single year as they decide where they send their children. I live in Ward 8. I live right next to the Arc off of Mississippi Avenue. Closest school to me is Turner Elementary School. But my children don't attend that school. They attend Ludlow Taylor, which is on Capitol Hill. And the reason that I made that choice is because I wanted a quality education for my child. I know that teachers and school leaders, in fact, I know the school leader I knew him, he is now in another position, but I knew the leader at Turner Elementary School, but I chose to put my child in Ludlow Taylor because of the resources that they were receiving. when parents are talking about getting a quality education for their children, we're talking about equity and the resources that they have in that particular school. Turner is underfunded. It does not have the resources that it needs to be a quality school. And it's not for effort of the teachers or the school leaders, but it's actually the money that we're putting into schools. So we want schools to make sure that they have nice social emotional learning that happens in that particular school. We want them to be academically challenging. We want to make sure that they have good enrichment programs. I look at the programs that they offered at Turner Elementary School as opposed to the ones they offered at at Ludlow Taylor, and they were miles apart. And anybody who stepped into the two schools can see that. I serve on my child's LASAT, and I see what the budgets look like. I have that experience. Most of the at-large people who are running for this position don't know what it's like to go through that process of budgeting and seeing what happens in the school and how you create a quality school. So when we're talking about quality school, we're talking basically about equitable funding, making sure that they have the wraparound social emotional learning experiences that they need, and that teachers are being actually, supported in their positions. And that also comes in the way of how many social workers do you have in a particular school? How many mental health practitioners do you have in a school? Those things matter. And I'm seeing one thing happen in some schools east of the river, and I'm seeing a totally different thing happen in schools that are west of the park and west of the river. So quality to me means that a school is equitably funded, that you're meeting parents where they are and you're engaging them, and that you have the resources to make sure that learning is happening every day in the school.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Patterson. Next, we have Charles Boston.
Yes, thanks, Raven. To me, quality school is where, all students are capable of learning and there are no limits to learning. The dignity of the student and respect for his or her personal circumstances, culture, language diversity is always affirmed by teachers and staff. Also, where students, students learn differently. Boys and girls learn differently, and they learn at different paces. And so we have to make sure that, schools offer caring and sensitive and have responsible teachers and staff that heighten the students' desire for learning and create conditions for success. But ultimately, as it was mentioned by many of the other candidates already, the community has to be involved. We can't undermine the importance of the community. Some of these schools, they don't even have PTAs or PTOs. And so the schools that you look at that are top performing schools, they have strong PTAs and PTOs. They have people advocating for these young people that's talking to the teachers and the principals and letting them know what's going on in the community, and vice versa. There's an exchange there. That's not happening. And so one of the things that I'm recommending for Ward 7, which should have already been done, my son also attended Ludlow Taylor kindergarten through 5th, is having a cluster of PTOs. And so you have 18 DCPS schools in Ward 7. I've laid out a plan to have 5 clusters to where every single school has a PTO or PTA. So no student is allowed to fail. And so ideally, when working with stakeholders and the reintegration of vocational education, professional development for teachers, we address those issues and we'll have the quality schools that we're looking for.
Thanks for your answer, Mr. Boston. Next, we'll have Mr. Valentine. I'm sorry, can you please help me with your first name? Masiki. I don't want to pronounce it incorrectly.
It's okay, it's Mizuki.
Mizuki.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much for this question. I want to clear some false statements up, first of all. The work that I do every single day that I wake up to do is about analyzing the DC budget. I know very clearly how much money is in the DC budget, how much money is allocated to schools, and how much money is being siphoned from our public school systems to other entities that are not helping our students. First of all, a quality school building, all schools are quality if we make them. And one of the reasons that parents are having to make hard decisions and travel long distances to find quality schools is because we've allowed corporate educational interests to come in and siphon our tax dollars that would otherwise go to our public school systems to ensure that all kids have a fully funded quality public educational experience. My work this year specifically enforced adding more mental health professionals inside of school buildings. So I want to clear up that there are people in this fight who know very clearly where the money is going, despite the rhetoric that is being told. As I've said, a quality school, first of all, is a safe haven for students, hands down, and it is filled with compassionate teachers, mentors, and leaders who are all invested. I am a graduate of Shaw Junior High School, and so I got to see what it was firsthand experience when the government disinvests from a school. My mother lost her choice to put me in a public school system because there were no public school systems available for me at that time. This is an issue, and this is what I'm working to fight. Parents need ultimate choice, and that choice is not sending your kid to Capitol Hill when you live in Ward 8. It's about being able to have a quality school that is fully funded with resources inside of your community.
Thank you for the answer, Mr. Valentine. Next, we will have Dontrell Smith.
Thank you. So I'm a parent in Ward 7 that resides, but my son goes to Alistair Middle School. You know, Ward 7 has 37 public schools, but only 7 of those schools are rated 4 and 5 stars. But as I look at the comparisons of what's the difference that he gets at his Alistair Middle School, what's going on in Ward 7, first it starts with the community involvement. They have a very strong representative for Ward 3 State Board of Education. They got a very strong education council in Ward 3. A very active and involved. It starts with the community. They got a very strong PTA. They got the resources. They challenge and push these students. They got the books inside the classroom. They push learning inside as well as outside the classroom. Advanced teacher learning. They put emphasis on the quality development of the teachers. They have grants. They also have instructional coaches. They also have, and then also they partnerships with universities to build that relationships with the neighboring schools within the Tinley and the American University area. But one thing also, even looking at the high school where it feeds into Wilson, they have a strong school within schools. They got a business program, they got teaching, humanities, science, technology. To have a quality school, you got to make sure that we have everything that a school needs for students to succeed. And that's probably the biggest reason why, as a parent that live in Ward 7, that I do the 35-minute drive, because I know the importance of an education. And I know that the lack of what we have in Ward 7, but definitely want to advocate to make sure all students could get the fair quality education so they don't have to travel 35 minutes to school. Ward 7 is students travel the furthest to any school in the district, almost 3.3 miles because of the lack of the quality education. But it starts with the leadership. You know, effective leadership, effective change will help bring solutions to these low performance schools that make sure all schools in Ward 7 are 4 and 5 stars. But thank you.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Smith. Next, we have Sarah Malhotra.
Malhotra, thank you, Raven. I appreciate it. And I'll echo many of my peers so far, but just want to lift up 2 additional points. First is professional trust. We need to recognize that our teachers are experts and regard them as professionals and members of our community. Overnight during COVID-19 and distance learning, their world, in addition to all of our worlds, have been turned upside down, right? And their ability to adjust to distance learning nearly overnight, they have made a valiant effort, and in return, now upon return to school, are being met with punitive evaluations. And so I just want to reiterate that my vision for DC schools is professional trust in our teachers. The second thing that I just want to mention is family voice. Every parent and family member wants to be involved in education, and let's give them the tools and supports to do so. Let's go out into the community. For example, the recent survey that was given to families during distance learning was many parents didn't know, and many family members didn't know that it was being administered. Let's have more family engagement. Let's go out into communities. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Is there anyone else I missed who would like to also answer this question before we continue?
You missed me, Ms. Douglas.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Continue, Ms. Douglas.
All right, I just want to say, as I mentioned earlier, my granddaughter went 5 miles a day from schools. We had neighborhood schools here that were quality schools. And I think Mr. Valentine and Mr. Smith said it all. It's the teachers, is the problem is that they keep, the problem is with the teachers, what they're doing, they're taking the kids, I mean, the teachers are like, I think they only had like 5 years or something in regards to overturning. The bottom line, they have a lot of overturning within the school system. So that means our teachers who are our quality teachers go uptown to Ward 1, 2, and 3. So they don't keep here long enough for the kids to services. And number one is the money that's involved. If money's not here for the kids to have educational tools, how do you expect for them to learn when the with our city council and all taking the funds away? I think they spoke on that as well. But for Mr. Jock to say what he said, that there's no one on here that have that experience, I just want to say to him, I'm 70 years old, and I think I came out of school in 1981 with my degree. So I'm very aware of what's going on. And as PTA president, so I see for over 12 years, I'm definitely engaged. And what I find is that you're not bringing the parents to the table and you're not involving them. With them being involved, which would make our school stronger. So we need more stronger parents that would be there and have the voices for our kids. And that's what keeps the budget in. That's what happened to what is that school? Columbia Heights. They took over $2,000 away from our kids in appropriate funds and put it somewhere else so schools didn't need all that money. So the problem is they're transferring the money around. We need to come together as a unity and make sure that all our kids are being quality education. It doesn't matter where they go, it's how you're doing. If you don't have a passion and love for these kids, this is what's missing. Because my son was not great in math, and he went to Ward 8 school, and that was a friendship. This math teacher told him that he would never make a finish school, but he went and finished because I don't got extra education program books up. Programs are missing, took those out of the school to help our kids. So all these resources are very helpful for our kids to be get college readiness and also to be successful in life for school. So if we don't have any of this together, then we don't come together.
Sorry, Ms.
And
Douglas.
parents are not involved, come to the table. That's what we need to involve. So don't say what's not here that you haven't experienced. And I just want to say that's what's missing.
All right, thank you, Ms. Douglas. I also see a hand from Mr. Chang, Alistair Chang.
Thank you. So I think, you know, I've been mulling this over at the very macro level of how we define school success, right? Because these days, I think in the US in particular, and in DC too, we define schools, a quality school, as the institution that solves every social problem and fixes poverty in America. And that is a burden that needs to be shared. It cannot be just resting on schools and teachers without a broader support system. We've known for years what works, right? I think education research is not a new field, right? And clearly this academic research is not enough. I think where we need to be focusing on at the board level is how we actually do the advocacy work. A lot of folks answered by talking about equitable funding. How do we get there, right? How do we get there in a system where there are, like most urban contexts, very few political incentives for our council members or a mayor to prioritize education, particularly in my ward, in Ward 2, where we make up 2% of the student population. There are very few parents, and there are very few people engaged in education who live in my ward. How do we convince them, and many of them actually decide to send their kids to private schools because they have the means, right? How do we engage them into this conversation in a way that allows us to lift education up? LaJoy, I think your point about valuing families, valuing you and your daughter, you know, is for me a convincing argument, right? How do we turn that into an argument that convinces people who don't already get it to agree? And I think this goes back into actually leveraging the board as a means to convene advocates, right? To lift the voices of people so that we can convince the council members and the mayor to take education more seriously. How do we get there, right? And what do we need to get there to do to get there. I think first and foremost, my ward, Ward 2, is one of the only wards that doesn't have a coalition, an education coalition like the one that Kathy Riley has in Ward 4, or built out in Ward 4. It's one of the first things I would do if I was elected to this space, to be able to convene folks, including neighbors who do care about these equity questions, right? To have a platform to be able to actually then
All right, Mr. Chang.
make this a point. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, I will now pass it back to my co-host, Miss Michelle.
Thank you, Raven. I'm looking at the participants list, and shout out to my folks in Ward 5 for participating. We're not up for any seats right now, but you know, this is a citywide conversation, and so I appreciate my folks from Ward 5 for being on the line today. I want to close because we're getting close, and I do want to put out a question about mayoral control. But we have a question that came in specific to Ward 7 from a parent, and it's really so I want to put that question out to the Ward 7 candidates and get your responses, and then move on to a question about where the candidates stand on mayoral control of schools and the role of the State Board of Education as it relates to the district. So for Ward 7 candidates, the question is related to what we all know is a heavy socioeconomic divide in Ward 7. So as potential Ward 7 State Board of Education seated person, how do you plan to unite the divided voice of Ward 7 towards supporting the families that are impacted by the inequities that are heavily present in most of the schools? And it's funny because that came up a bit in a bit of the last conversation as it relates to many of the Ward 7 candidates, well, not many, but some folks talking about moving their students out of Ward 7 to access a better school. So to the Ward 7 candidates, I posed that question, and then we'll move on to a question for the group about where you all stand on mayoral control and the role of the State Board of Education. Ms. Thompson, I'll start with you from Ward 7.
Can I actually go last? I have a dog doing something strange. Sorry.
Thank you. Absolutely. Dontrell, you're Ward 7, right?
Sorry.
Yes, I'm Ward 7.
Okay. So we can take that question.
Can you? The first thing I would be is, as a ward, you got to work together collectively, jointly. That we got to get everyone involved. Schools are only as strong as their community. We got to get the PTA involved. Make sure every school has a PTA. We got to make sure all the ANC commissioners are active. We got to make sure the Ward 7 council member is held accountable. We got to make sure the Ward 7 State Board of Education person is having transparency. You know, making sure that everyone's know the pressing issues. Nothing will be solved on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. You know, we got to actually write letters, testify, call, make sure we get the allocation resource that we're supposed to get. Most importantly, the Education Council. Everyone got to work hand in hand together to collectively work together to help bridge this gap. And support, we need support from everyone. You're only as strong as your community. So I say, regardless of anything to help bridge this gap, to make sure we advocate it, everyone got to be transparent. You got to produce newsletters because everyone's not on social media. You got to send mailers, send lists, work with these commissioners, bring everything to forefront. It's a shame that outside of this ward, other ANC commissioners as well as wards are working with each other. We got to learn to work collectively within our Ward 7, and that's the biggest thing. If you hold everyone accountable, from the city council to the state board rep to the education council to ANC commissioners, we got to work together, but it starts within, you know, repetition, got to make sure, get on the ground working, canvas, go grassroots, go door knocking, find out everybody concerns, the ones that leaving the ward, the ones that's within the ward, but we got to fight collectively together. But it starts with holding everyone accountable, as well as we got to be transparent and pushing things out there to get it out there. Like I said, you can never start with canvassing neighborhoods and hitting these commissioners. You know, you shouldn't talk to people once a month and that's enough. No, we need to be transparent all the time. That's the biggest thing, and that's probably the best thing I could say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ms. Williams? Karen, I see your hand up.
I'm sorry, I didn't unmute myself. Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
As a current representative from Ward 7 on the State Board of Education, I'd like to just reiterate that at this point in our articulation or our being, we do not have the power to make some of these decisions. Well, how we handle these situations is to bring in people who can testify about the different issues that we have. One is one of the big ones that we're working on is teacher retention, because we find that without strong teachers in our schools, we cannot bring our students up to the education level that they need to be successful in life and beyond. But I just want to say that
right now. Not right now. Please close that door. Oh, sorry,
we're talking, no problem. What we're talking about right now is the difference between a state board and a school board. Maybe we need to have, I know we were asking a question about mayoral control at some point, but that we need to have an interjection between the state board that has one issue and one set of things to work on, and a school board, which would be curriculum and other types of day-to-day things, special education. Those are two different issues that we need to look at and see how we can make our ward stronger and better for our children.
Thank you so much, Ms. Williams. Mr. Boston.
Yes, thank you for the question. For me, it's really frustrating. I spent a lot of my younger years in the ward, and what I can say from speaking with parents and students and what I know to be a fact, over the last 10 years plus, there really hasn't been no advocacy. You know, the State Board of Education has a student advisory council that has been established for like 5 years. Okay, number one, they don't even engage students in civics. You know, they pick and choose representatives for the student advisory council. And so we wonder why we have young people that graduate and that don't vote. We wonder why some of the issues that's going on in the community are not being addressed. You know, they're not engaging. The State Board of Education serves a role. You have to engage. You can't just sit downtown. You know, you have to go to the schools. You have to go to the communities. Bring the State Board of Education meeting to the PTA meetings. Bring it to the community. And I mean, you have to have ideas. I mean, we've been dealing with the same issues in Ward 7 for the last 20 years. And it's getting worse. And so ideally, you have to deliberately want to do something different. You have to come up with ideas. I've been working with UDC to rehabilitate the East Capitol Urban Farm for the last year and a half. I mean, you have to think outside the box. You have to find ways to reach these students, and you can't wait until high schools. You have to also look at what deals with what affects performance, such as nutrition. A lot of these kids are not getting breakfast in the morning. A lot, health. You know, a lot of these kids are not going to the doctor every day. They're not going to the dentist every day. It's a number of things that affect performance that's being ignored, that's not being addressed. And you constantly hear people saying, well, we just need more money. You can put $20,000 per student. You still will not solve some of the issues if the issues within the community are not addressed. As I mentioned before, 2/3 of what it takes for a child to be successful in school occurs outside of the school. If you don't have a State Board of Education representative that understands that knows that, and that's determined to address that, you will have what you have now, and you'll have a society that's eroding. You'll have people younger and younger out here in front of these liquor stores. You know, the crime and violence has escalated, and it's going to continue to increase. Why? Because they're not learning. Why? Because no one cares. And so you have to be involved.
Mr. Boston, we're at time. I'm so sorry to cut you off. I'm so sorry to cut into that good conversation, sir. I do apologize. Ms. Thompson, are you able to speak on this one yet?
I got it together. I will say a couple of things are important. So one is, I am the current chair of the Ward 7 Education Council. And the Ward 7 Education Council is not just one person. I'm proud to say that the Ward 7 Education Council is made up of parents, it's made up of teachers, it's made up of community members who care about what's happening in their schools and who are heavily involved. And I will also say that we can point to some tangible, not just opportunities, but wins. And we've done that through collaboration across Ward 7. A couple I would like to highlight. First and foremost, last budget season was a disaster. It was a disaster because we looked at it and we actually do crunch the numbers along with a lot of other people. But when we looked at it, there were about $15 million missing in at-risk funds from our schools. And we worked with ANCs and civic associations to lobby the council to get that money back, in addition to other ward councils. There's a document that exists, a resolution that we created that every Ward 7 ANC signed on to. If that's not collaboration, if that's not advocacy, if that's not showing up and absolutely showing out because it benefited all schools, both DCPS and charter, then I would challenge people to think about what is. Second, I would like to say that we've also created opportunities where there were none, because a lot of people are right about the fact that our system is not one that engages families or engages just stakeholders more generally. It's not built into our current structure. That's the truth. And we've had to create opportunities to build that in. When we chose another new chancellor, because we've chosen 5 in about as many years, there was no process for that. Not really. And so what we did was we worked with our council member who did get a vote to confirm. We invited him to our meeting, and we invited everyone across Ward 7, and many people showed up, and we created our own criteria.
Ms. Thompson, I'm sorry, Ms. Thompson, we're at time.
Yeah, what that leader should look like. We presented it to the council and other ward.
Ms. Thompson, we're over 2 minutes.
Like the one in Ward 3. So that's collaboration, and that's bringing people together.
Thank you so much. This is good dialogue, and I'm looking at the time, and I realize we don't really have more time for the question of mayoral control. So we may have to get back together. But I do want to give an opportunity for all the candidates to just give a brief closing remark. You know, something very brief about and memorable about why candidates, why members of your ward should vote for you on November 3rd. Ms. Thompson, since you last had the mic, please, you know, can you give your closing remarks, and then I'll go down the list, and then we'll wrap it up. Sure. So just brief, like 15, 20 seconds, 30 seconds max.
20 seconds, and why you should vote for me. You should vote for me because I'm someone who cares about education and has cared about education no matter what the position, title, or opportunity to show up is. I have been involved, I will continue to be involved, and I look forward to working hard as your State Board of Education representative. If you'd like to learn more about me, please go to my website, www.ebonyrose, EBONIROSE, DC.com. And thank you for the opportunity today.
Thank you. Mr. Patterson, closing remark? Why should we vote for you?
Thank you. Again, I'm John Patterson, running for the at-large position on the State Board of Education. You should vote for me because I believe all means all. That means all children, all parents, regardless of where they place their children or where their child attends, that we need representation on both sides that will get the community involved in the decisions that's being made, that's going to elevate their voices in a way that is going to be taken notice. I have 20 years of experience of working with parents, of working with children in programs that have elevated their voice. And I would love to do that citywide and make a difference for all of our children. I thank you for the opportunity to run, and my website is www.jacquesfordc.com.
Thank you. Dr. Reed, closing remarks?
Hi. So yes, basically I believe empathy takes action.
I'm not trying to be rude, but my phone get ready to go off. Can you get me the next time around? Because I only had like 15 seconds left, please.
Douglas, do you want to go? Because I got all the battery power. Go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I just want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity. Yes, I'm here as a former ANC commissioner and also ANC commissioner for over 12 years, and in the school system. I worked in the school system for over 40 years. So it's most important that we actually be involved. And I think Ms. Thompson said it all. And I was the one to sign off on the the list for our kids to have more quality education and making sure that we come together together as a family. The problem is that we need to make sure that our parents are connected. We have a voice that speaks for our children. They are part of being involved in the decision making, and that's what the issues are. Even though they're taking the money away, city is, they need to make sure that those funds remain at the schools that it are, and not just shuffling the money where they choose to be. And that's what the issue, parents' involvement, community involvement, and most of all, love and passion. This is what's missing. And one thing I want to say quick, our returned citizens, their children are more hurt than this, as much as our at-risk children. They all need to be on the board, which I've done with the, not RC, but with the Return Citizen Program. So I'm currently always involved with our kids, and I will continue to be for years to come, and let God let me see another 72 years to come. So I just want to say thank you.
Ms. Douglas. Thank you. Dr. Reed, your closing remarks.
Yes. So I believe that empathy takes action. And if you are at the table but not doing anything with it, then you are just taking up space. You are just eating. We need transformative leadership around education that's hyper-focused on education. And as a 15-year educator, special educator, I have demonstrated that. You can see more about my creative decision makings and solutions that I've curated around education in DC at my website, on my website at letsread.com. That's LETSREID.com. I have worked with parents, teachers, administrators, the full stakeholder network, and I'm looking forward to leading Ward 8 in this capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, closing remarks.
Thank you. Thank you again for hosting all of us. As I stated during this discussion, I truly appreciate these events because it requires us to have some of the much needed dialogue about the issues impacting our schools, students, parents, educators, and most importantly, the community. These discussions reignite the fire burning inside of me to represent Ward 7 for the long haul. I thank the representatives who have served before me, but we all are in need of a new change, and I'm that person. We spoke about unity, within Ward 7, and I wholeheartedly agree. It's time to put the differences aside and work together collectively. I share my experiences with my son in a Ward 3 school, and the biggest difference is everyone understands that it takes a village, and that village are the students, the parents, the educators, and the community. We have to work together to support the whole child, the whole school, and which will support the whole community. So once again, my name is Dontrell Smith. I'm running for Ward 7 State Board of Education, and I'm running on accountability, education equity, and most importantly, transparency. And I'm a proud. Thank you.
We're I'm not trying. I hate the rush. I hate the rush, but we definitely are over our time. And I want to give everybody an opportunity to close. Ms. Williams, closing remarks.
Okay, I'll get in here.
You got it?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Karen Williams, and I'm running for my third term as State Board of Representative for Ward 7. I have been on the State Board since I gave up my job as a special ed teacher because I wanted to meet the needs of the students of Ward 7. I have worked with OSFI and the other agencies to make sure that our transition and our relationships are good for our students, and I will continue to do this as long as you keep me in office. I thank you for this opportunity to speak to you, and one day I will be releasing information soon on exactly the role of what the State Board does, because what you're talking about is a school board right now. Have a great day, and thank you for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Boston, brief closing remarks.
Yes, thank you. Real quick, ideally, I plan to bring accountability as well as transparency to the board, change and balance, be a strong voice for students and parents, simply to put students over politics. Ideally, if you're in the educational space and you see the need that's there, we know what prayer has done to education. It's just time. It's time for change, and it's time for aggressive change. My website is charles.sboe.com. You can find out more about me. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Ms. Merotra, did I get it? Did I get it?
You did, and I appreciate it. Again, my name is Merotra, and thank you all so much for your time. You should vote for me because I have education, I have been an educator, but most importantly, I am a listener. And I would love to chat with anyone's call. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Chang, brief remarks to close.
Yes, so this is very emotional for me. When I was growing up, you know, my dad would memorize maps before we left the house. And I remember what happened if we got lost, the pure fear, right? Because he couldn't read road signs. I'm running to make sure that 100% of our students are equipped with 21st century literacy skills. To me, that's not just reading proficiency, that's digital literacy, that's financial literacy, that's health literacy. That's everything that they need to navigate the world so that they never have to feel the same fear of being desperately lost.
Thank you. Mr. Harnett?
Well, thank you to all the organizers and for all the candidates and viewers for being here today. This is a really great conversation and one I hope we have more of between now and November. I'm running because I know the need for elevating and uplifting the voices of students in our government. I've done that as an ANC commissioner. I'm the youngest person to ever be chair of an ANC in this city's history. And I was able to get to that point because of my ability and I think our community's ability to come together and to organize and to fight for the priorities that we all need to move forward. There are a few things I want to touch on that I hope we can talk about in a future conversation. We need to return oversight and policy power to the state board. We need to hold—
Mr. Harnett, I'm sorry. Can you put those points in the chat? Because you're over your 30 seconds.
No, of course. Thanks so much.
If you could share your points in the chat, folks can take away those notes. I appreciate it, and we'll try to get those out for you. Mr. Valentine, quick closing remarks.
Yes, thank you all for having me today. My name is Miziki Valentine, and I'm running to represent DC families on the State Board of Education at large. I'm running because I believe that all students deserve fully funded futures, and that means that we are holding people accountable and we are being transparent about where our tax dollars are going and how they're serving our students, regardless of their background, socioeconomic status, zip code, or mental or physical disabilities. I want to say, as the only candidate in the at-large race using the Fair Elections program, this means I've made a commitment to only serve DC families. This means that I will only be serving people who are directly impacted by the educational inequities afoot.
Mr. Valentine, wait, over time. I'm sorry.
At this point, it'll take 2 seconds. Okay, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. If you could put it in all your last info in the chat, that would be helpful. We just have a few, we're over time and we're just trying to give everybody a chance to close. Mr. Perry, brief closing remarks.
Absolutely. I'm Robbie. Some of my students call me Dr. Perry. I'm a professor at Howard. I am in this race because I want to ensure that every single student that leaves the school system, and whether they go to VOTEC or they go to college, that they are prepared to be a productive citizen. I know how to do that because I've devoted my life to education just like every other adult in my family. I don't have the answers. I don't think any of us here will say that we have all the answers or the ideas, but together we have to find the solutions that these students need today. And I have a background in politics and policy that makes sure that not only does education win, not only do students win and families win, but we have to cut through the politics and make it happen. So I believe I'm the person who can do that in the at-large race, and I hope you go to RobbiePerry4DC.com.
Thank you. Chris, Mr. Atis, are you still with us?
I'm still with you guys. Yes, thank you so much. So I'm running for Ward 2, State Board of Education. I spent 20 years creating education technology, was there at the get-go to create virtual learning, have done it around the world. And I'm trying to give back to the District of Columbia, its students, its teachers, its parents, its administrators. Thank you all.
Thank you. And Ms. Law.
Yes, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Michelle and Tri-Board Free and Sainara and DC for Democracy and the Teachers Union. I am running Anna Bria. Thank you so very much, and everyone just bearing with me. I'm running for the Ward 8 State Board of Education seat because there are no parents there are no Black parents with school-aged children on the state board right now, and we can no longer make decisions without equitable parent voice. And as a parent, as a mother, as with having almost a decade of experience, I am an educator, I am a teacher, I am my child's advocate, and we need to make sure that every single family in Ward 8 is at the decision-making table to make new decisions for this city. Families and parents are carrying education in this nation and in this city, and it's time we're respected, and it's time that we're heard, period. Vote for LaJoy Johnson Law. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you. So that brings us to our end. I will pass the mic to Chioma Oru to close us out. We do appreciate everyone taking the opportunity to participate with us. It means a lot that that you joined us and you understand our platform and where we stand on disability equity throughout the district. Chioma, would you like to share anything before we exit the meeting room?
Sure, yes. Thank you all so much for taking the time to share your platforms. This election season is extremely important on 100 different levels, but when it comes to education, I'm grateful that we had this opportunity to center these conversations around issues that I think are critical to DC families and critical to the future of our children. I would thank our moderators, our hosts here, my sister, Michelle Parrish, one of the 5 Bright Bean Pat Fellows, and our wonderful leader rising here, Raven Carter of Black Swan Academy. Sister, you really showed out. Thank you so much. Thank you to our partners, Sonara, Lindsay Jones-Renault, another sister, and Laura Fuchs from Washington Teachers Union, and Kashini, I'm so sorry, I forget your last name, and with DC for Democracy, and everyone that's here this evening. This event is recorded. We'll make sure that the recordings are made available. It's streamed live, so that's another way to catch back. And I want to again apologize, we weren't able to get our Spanish translator and our ASL translator, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna transcribe this event and also make that available in Spanish for people who may want to have that. And in our future events, we will do better to make sure that we have our translation services, because that's extremely important, and I don't want to add to the divide between who gets to have access and who doesn't to these important forums. Thank you all so much, and have a wonderful and blessed evening.
Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Y'all have a good one.